Good evening, everyone. To a little bit of a loaded mag special tonight. Look, all the talk is that we're just waiting for the Eddie Howe signature, the sign off for him to be our new manager. And with all the talk of this week and Eddie Howe being kind of thrusted into the number one spot to become the manager, thought it was a great opportunity to talk to fans that know him very, very well. So it's great to have Tom Jordan from the AFCB podcast. Welcome, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, appreciate it.
No problem, man. No, obviously, of course, we've got the loaded magman. We've got Rich in the house. How are you, Rich?
I'm all right, Pete. You, mate?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. So, look, let's get down to it. We know, ever since, Mike Ashley was in charge, Eddie Howe's been linked to Newcastle as being his next job since he left Bournemouth for a long time now. And with that has come a lot of scrutiny. People have, looked at his record, looked at various other things within his managerial career. And I think it was important to have this sort of chat with you tonight, Tom, just because obviously from your perspective as a Bournemouth fan, there are some sort of misconceptions or some opinions on Eddie Howe that are not quite necessarily the case. So, I mean, first and foremost, what made you Bournemouth fans love Eddie Howe so much? Was there something in particular that stood out that made you guys love him, in the way in which you still do, effectively?
I mean, to be fair, mate, it's everything. It's where we are now as a football club. The whole football club changed, and it's all thanks to Eddie Howe, to be honest. To try and, you can go over it for ages, but to try and kind of summarise it, he was a player at the club, a very good player. He ended up going to Portsmouth and having a bad injury and retired really early. But he was a good player at the football club, captain for a bit. And then he started working with the kind of youth team and things like that, while he retired early. We were at the bottom of League Two, minus 17 points because of going into administration and all that stuff. Gave him an opportunity because he was cheap. He was already at the club, so we gave him a chance, and he kept us up, which the Great Escape, which we didn't expect. Following season, we had transfer embargo. We got automatic promotion. Went up to League One. We were in the top two, and Burnley come sniffing, and he left us for Burnley to take on that challenge. Fortunately for us, it didn't quite work for him there, and he come back to us following season when we were in the relegation zone of League One. Come back, and we got automatic promotion. Went up to the Championship. First time I've ever seen the club in the Championship. We were in there first season 10th, second season won the league. 5 seasons in the Premier League. So, just saying that to you there, I think it shows why we all love him. I mean, never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I'd see Bournemouth in the Championship. So to see us in the Premier League for 5 seasons was incredible. A little bit of backing along the way, of course. As we started growing up the leagues, we managed to get a backer in and sort us out financially. But, people talk about this kind of, like he spent loads of money. We went up from the Championship, and our highest fee was for your Callum Wilson. At the time, we spent 3 million on him, which was a decent bit of business, I think. So yeah, he's just a legend here, mate. And honestly, if he goes to you guys, which looks like he will be, every Bournemouth fan's second team would be Newcastle. Put it that way.
Good to hear. I mean, look, you've basically given us sort of the summary of his career so far, really, as a manager. And you've talked a lot about, obviously, he's come through the ranks, 17 points adrift, managed to keep you guys in the league. Then he's took you up all the way to the Premier League. That's not easy. That's not easy in a managerial career in lower league football, to take someone from League Two to effectively to the Premier League. Do you think, because there are some people that are kind of dismissing that, the people in the media, in fact, are just kind of dismissing the job that he did there. Do you think that's really harsh on Eddie Howe?
Yes, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, I always say if the kind of rise of us, the football club, was a film, you wouldn't believe it. You'd say it's too far fetched. But I do also appreciate that people say, he hasn't done that job with a big football club. He rallied the troops down in League Two and got us together, and he ran the football club as well. He done everything, He was the first in, last out. You know, he had all the decisions. He didn't really have people above him telling him, you know, what to do or anything like that. So it was a unique position for him, and he was worshipped here, like I say, so he could do what he wants. So yeah, it will be a completely different type of job, and people will say, you know, we had 5 seasons in the Premier League, and then when he tried to bring through a new group and some maybe bigger names, it didn't quite work. So I get that side of it, but then equally, you hear guys in the media saying, well, when are these people going to get a chance? You know, when Sean Dyche's going to get a chance? Is Graham Potter ever going to get a chance? All these sort of people, you're not going to know until they're given it. And I think he certainly earned that right, certainly earned the right. And it's a new project at Newcastle. And as much as on a completely different scale, what he had at Bournemouth was a long-term project. It was right at the bottom, and he took us all the way to the top. So he's only ever managed a real project, and he was a success. So I think he likes something that there's no reason. There's a reason why he's been out of the game for a while now, because he wouldn't just take any sort of job. I think he wants that kind of that project and that long-term vision. And you know, whatever you guys have said to him and whatever he said to them has obviously matched perfectly. So I think that's a good sign, really.
Definitely. It's, you know, it seems really strange that he's been out of work for so long, but you're absolutely right. And I know that we've touched on it on Loaded before about the fact that, you know, he's not just going to take any job. You know, he was odds-on favourites to be the Celtic manager in the summer, and it was, you know, as far as we was concerned, it was a done deal. But you know, it looks like, and I know your boys on your pod today, Tom, were talking about, you know, it looked like once he'd actually met with Celtic and realised how much of a mess they were in, that it was a job that he, you know, I don't think he really wanted to take. So we was waiting for that right job, and you're right. It's a massive project from our point of view, from a Newcastle takeover point of view, and it's a job that, you know, I don't think he'd be able to turn down. It's his chance to really kind of put himself, as you said, project himself into that upper echelons of the Premier League and really kind of test himself at the top, given the resources and the opportunity to stay in the league. So, no, fantastic points. Rich, if you've got anything you want to throw in, please, by all means, get your questions in.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I was talking to Tom about before we went live, I think one of the things that I found over the last few weeks or so is that I think media and pundits have been pretty lazy in regards to the way they've critiqued Eddie Howe. You know, the turnaround said, "Oh, well, he went to Burnley, but he couldn't leave Bournemouth. He's obsessed with the South Coast and stuff like that." And I think, you know, when you dig a bit deeper, and Tom will verify this, but the fact that, you know, one of the reasons why he went back to Bournemouth was because of the death of his mother, and it was hard on his family. Do you know what I mean? And I think that would, you know, that shows what sort of guy he is. He's committed to his day-to-day job, but like every single person out there, family still comes first. And obviously, he gave up a job that he was doing at Burnley, given a chance, and unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. But, you know, the stigma that goes with him saying, "Oh, he can't leave Bournemouth, he's attached to the South Coast." You know, he even said in plenty of interviews, if you actually go and do your research, he said, "I had to look for a project where I was happy that we could like uproot the whole family and stuff like that." I think it's very, very relevant to get that point out there. And as you mentioned before, Tom, as well, you know, he started with a 17-point deficit when they went administration, and then have a transfer embargo, and the amount of people going, "Oh, well, that's only League Two. I don't care. You've only got League Two players. It's all about coaching. You haven't been able to bring anybody in." That goes to show how good a coach he is. And at the minute in time, until we get through into the transfer window and he can make a few changes and additions, he's going to be relied upon his coaching. Now we know through having Rafa Benitez, who was a fantastic coach, that a lot of these players you can get a lot more out of if you coach them correctly. People like Shaw and Lascelles was a linchpin in the back for us, but he's a shadow of himself since then. The same with people like Shaw and Longstaff. You know, as I mentioned to Tom off there, me and Pete are you know, coaches. We love to take in info and learn off others and stuff like that. We love the way Eddie Howe talks to his players on the pitch. When Pete shared a video of the pre-season camp, I think it was at La Manga a couple of years ago when and it was really good and insightful to see how he talked to his players and got his ideas across. I just think, personally, I think he's a fantastic appointment for what we need. I think the one thing I'd like to say to you, ask you really, Tom, is, there's a lot of people turning around saying that, he's not going to hack it and stuff like that. And he's only a manager for now. Can you see him being a long-term manager? He's not the first manager. He is the manager for the project, full stop.
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, like we've previously mentioned about the fact that it's taken him a while to kind of go for the job, because he seems to be very picky in that. He wants that project. So he has no way is he taking a job if he thinks it could be short-term. So he believes in his own capabilities. I think, the guys at the top now at Newcastle obviously believe in that. And he will only be looking at it if it's a long-term thing. I think originally when he went to Burnley, he thought that was going to be kind of the thing. So he'll be looking long-term, definitely. But I think first and foremost, he will be the good thing about Eddie Howe is, I think, to try and, I'm always going to be someone that I absolutely worship the guy. I think he's unbelievable. I'm convinced he'll be a success. The only thing that's probably the question marks are still with kind of bigger players, when he goes into the market and them sort of high caliber players. But in terms of what you got now, he is known of squeezing every last inch out of kind of them average Premier League players, say, them players that he'll just get a bit more out of every single one of them. He really will. And yeah, he'll definitely see it as long term. He'll be looking at it as a really good starting point where he can just build something from the top, from bottom to top. And like I say, it's on a much bigger scale, but that's exactly what he done at Bournemouth. It was a building project. We were always happy to be League One side, and he's left us where we're top of the Championship, and that's where everyone expects us to be. But we weren't that. We were, from 8 years, we were bottom of League Two to Premier League. So, he knows how to build a project. Like I say, this is going to be a bigger test for him, but I'm absolutely convinced he'll keep you guys up, no problem. And then, it'll be interesting to see how he does in the market and things like that, because he's never been in a position where he's been able to attract them sort of players. He's had to go to the Championship, and the only one I ever hear on the media is people talk about, Jordan Ibe. He signed Jordan Ibe. He also signed Callum Wilson for £3 million. He signed Josh King for nothing. Yeah. So he's not bad in the market. But it'll be interesting because he's never had this kind of. This would be a new market for him, for the caliber of player he can bring in. So that'll be really interesting. I'm interested to see how he does with that.
I think one of the things me and Pete were talking about today in our WhatsApp chat was saying that he's got that experience in the Premier League, and so for the sort of additions that we need to make now, he's going to be an ideal sort of manager for that. I think the only thing I ever had reservations about going forward as a long-term manager, but I think that can be rectified by whoever you employ as your director of football or sport and director, is the potential attraction of overseas players. We're not just going to be looking at potentially, mercenary foreigners. We could be looking at, and I hate to say the word that Real Madrid used to have all the time, but Galactico level type thing, because of the money that we've got. Yeah. We're going to get attracted. So are they going to be attracted to Newcastle because we've got a lot of money? Or, is Eddie Howe going to be part of that attraction? I think that might be some doubts for some of the foreign imports. But I think if you get a fantastic appointment above him as the director of football sport, I think that one takes care of itself, because I think Eddie Howe as a coach, full stop, can probably work under anybody.
Yeah, and I think he will also. He's not stupid. He would have looked at that and thought, I need to get the right people in around me. I think one of the reasons why it didn't end up going to Celtic was because I don't think they could guarantee him the kind of staff around him that he felt he needed, because it's a completely different job to Bournemouth. So I think he will know. He's not stupid. He'll know that, to go into that foreign market and stuff, which we didn't delve into much, being a small football club, is something that he'll have to look into for the recruitment side of things. But yeah, I think it will be one of the things. I think, like you said, right now he's the perfect man in terms he'll know. People talk about that relegation at the end, but we were in the Premier League 5 years. We never should be in the Premier League 5 years. So he does know how to keep a team up. But I think going forward, obviously that's what's going to be mentioned at the moment, is just making sure you guys stay up. But I'll tell you what, you'll have a manager who's very good on the eye as well to watch the teams, to watch. Very brave. When it goes wrong, you might get called naive, but it's brave and it's bloody good football. And I think you guys have been, crying out for that for a long time.
Definitely. We and that's what's been really encouraging, is because he's always stuck to his guns in terms of his philosophy. There's a video going circling around when he was on Monday Night Football after he left you guys, and he was questioned on the fact, that he's conceded a lot of goals, and it has been a talking point within the fan base, I have to be honest, about the amount of goals that he conceded. But he was very bullish in his mindset in terms of, he's not going to change his philosophy in his belief in the way in which he wants his teams to play. And I respect that. I respect that a lot, because that shows bravery, as you've talked about, and it shows that, he trusts himself and he trusts his own process. And that's what you want at the top of the level. At the top level, the best managers are brave. They take risks and they believe in themselves. And he's shown already, with the way he's handled himself in his managerial career, that he bets on himself every single time. But you made a good point just before about some of the transfers. You could throw Nathan Ake in there, a fantastic signing. Would you say overall, with all the signings that you've made, would you say he made more better signings than maybe than not, or overall?
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously the early stages where it was very much kind of lower league players, kind of getting them really cheap free agents, that they're all superb. I mean, we come up to the Premier League with players that none of them had really played in the Premier League, and obviously, like I mentioned before, you Callum Wilson's. We don't particularly like talking about Ryan Fraser, but it was a good business at the time. He cost next to nothing. There was a few, maybe the kind of higher profile ones that get spoke about. Jordan Nye was about 15, 20 million quid. Didn't work out. Dom Solanke is one that I think 20 million sounds a lot for Dom Solanke, but he's very young, and at the moment he's one of the top goal scorers in the Championship, and he's kind of spearheading us to try and get back up there, to be fair. So that remains to be seen. But I think overall he was brilliant in the market, and like you say, even the players that people say was a lot of money, we still managed to make our money back on them, or make a fair profit. And like I say, the best thing was kind of developing young players. He always brought in young players. It was probably the ones that didn't work out were the likes of, he actually used to play for you, like Sylvain Distin and people like that he was kind of trying to think, oh, can I just get that bit of experience? And maybe they were looking for a last payday. It didn't quite work out. But when he was going for them younger players, I always felt he knew what kind of characters he wanted. And that was really important to him. But yeah, and it was always about fitting into the style of play, which, like you say, was very, very unique. He had a philosophy, and probably most Bournemouth fans would say the season where he tried to address the defensive issues was when we went down, because he probably looked at it and thought, I need to address it now. We've been in the Premier League 5 years, and we tried to be a little bit harder to beat and play counter-attack, and it didn't quite work because we went away from what we knew, really. So yeah, it's one of them things that people say about different, if he's not very good defensively and does he need to plan B, Pep, Klopp, them sort of people, they make plan A better, don't they? So yeah. I think his philosophy will stay intact, and he'll try and attack first and foremost. But listen, we still got these good results that people forget. We went to Stamford Bridge a couple of times and won 1-0. He was very much game to game, and he'd try and do what he can to win that football match. And yeah, it's at the end of the day, weird. People look at it, if Norwich have just come up, but there's teams like Blackpool that have been up that shouldn't be up, and do you expect them to be good at the back? Probably not. It's one of them things. With the tools he had, we were punching above our weight. We really were, and he was brilliant.
I think you touched on it, and it was a really good point, that Eddie Howe kind of gets every ounce of effort out of his players. And from the outside looking in, it was difficult because it was COVID anyway. You've already touched on the fact that you had a lot of injuries running up to the end of the season. I know running into the game where we played you, I think we beat you, was it 4-1, 4-2 at your place at the Vitality. And, I think Callum Wilson wasn't fit. I'm not sure if even Josh King was fit or he was struggling whilst playing. You had a number of players out. That's difficult. We know that full well when we had Alan St-Maximin, Almiron, Wilson, I think one or two others all at the same time for a chunk of the season. That's not easy. But, going back to you kind of how getting an ounce of every ounce out of every player, I looked at your squad and I looked at your players that you had at the back end of that season that you got relegated, and there was a number of them that had been there for a long time, a number of them that had aged quite a lot. Francis being one of them, Charlie Daniels, one or two others in that squad, and it was a case of like, you know, we're at that stage now where we need to kind of sort of, you know, freshen up the squad, get new players in, and maybe it just got to that point where he had got everything out of them. And I've always been of that mindset of Eddie Howe, that some of those players that he had in his last season at Bournemouth, you know, probably should have been moved on a little bit early, but maybe not for financial reasons that he couldn't have. Maybe they're too much of leaders in the dressing room. You know, Francis being a captain, for example. And it's very, very difficult. We're in that position right now. So, you know, that was one of the things that always stuck in my mind. I think there's a lot of people out there that don't think like that. Some of those players came up with you guys and went through that process. That's a long time to stay in the top flight, having come from lower league. And it does catch up with you. If you don't transform or transition your squad, it makes a massive difference. So, you know, I don't hold too much against Eddie Howe, and never have, for the fact that he got relegated, because he, you know, it was amazing for him to do the job that he did for the period of time that he did it at Bournemouth, with the resources and the budgets and everything that you've talked about. So, you know, that's definitely a point that sort of like needed to be raised 100%. But
I think following on from that, Pete, as well, is, as I said to Tom earlier, is you've got to take into consideration, well, Wilson was out injured for a while at the end of that season. So was Josh King. Ryan Fraser down tools, because obviously what he's moving these free, you know, in the summer after Project Restart. And you know what we all forget is, and I didn't know this until I was listening to Talk Sport this afternoon, and it reminded us, technically Aston Villa should have been relegated if that VAR decision for the goal against Sheffield United, you know, if that had gone the way it should have done, Bournemouth would have still been in the Premier League, and they wouldn't be talking this conversation about his relegation. And people have got to remember, if you take three of your better players out of our, look, we take Wilson and Sam Maxwell out of our team now, and we've got no chance at this moment in time. You know what I mean? You take three of their best players out, and then, you know, they're fighting relegation. It doesn't help. And obviously, an unlucky disallowed goal that wasn't given sent them down, unfortunately. And people have got to take all this and put it into perspective when they're making decisions on someone. Just say, oh, but this relegation. That's, everyone seems to be focused on that, and that's the wrong way to look at Eddie Howe.
I think as much as obviously kind of COVID and playing behind closed doors affects everyone, I think you mentioned there, Peter, we spoke to, so we actually managed to speak to Simon Francis on our podcast, and like you say, he was the captain and he was out injured, and he said that what they found really difficult was when it was behind closed doors and when we needed kind of players that had been around for ages. If they were injured or not in the squad, they weren't allowed to be in the dressing room because of COVID, and he said Eddie would always have us in there. You know, he'd have all that group in there, you know, help it, you know, kind of rally them and stuff like that. And he said that was really tough on Eddie because his experienced players and the ones that he'd had with him the whole time weren't allowed to be in there because of COVID, and they were injured and stuff. So there's little things that I think, you know, Eddie would have been really frustrated with, like you say, with the injuries and stuff like that. But in terms of squeezing the best out of them sort of players as well, I think our best ever finish was 9th in our second season in the Premier League. Callum Wilson was out for most of that as well. I mean, we finished 9th for the Premier League, and Benik Afobe was on, you know, our main man up top. And no disrespect to Benik, but he's not a prolific Premier League goal scorer. You know, we had Jordan Ibe on the wing. I think we played, you know, I think it was kind of Stanislas, Ibe, King, and Afobe was kind of our front four that season. Never should finish 9th. You know, and he really did squeeze the best out of them. And like you mentioned there, that kind of back four that went up was Simon Francis, Tommy Elphick, Steve Cook, Charlie Daniels, and maybe it got to the end where they were all kind of coming to an end, and to bring through a new group all at the same time maybe he found difficult because, you know, but like I mentioned about squeezing the best out of them, Simon Francis was told he wasn't good enough by Charlton. Steve Cook was released, I believe, by Brighton. Charlie Daniels we got from Leyton Orient. So that's what I mean. You know, these people were told they weren't good enough from kind of League One sides, and Eddie made them Premier League players that you all now know. So that says it all really. But yeah, I think it was that kind of change of all that group that he has got the best out of and have been on that journey with him were coming to an end, and he couldn't quite. And like you said, I wonder if it was he kind of taken us to that. There's a limit with Bournemouth. There always will be. If you ask any Bournemouth fan, we'll say if we could be a stabilised Championship club, we'd rip your hands off from what we've kind of have as a football club. So there was a ceiling, whereas with Newcastle now, starting from the kind of bottom, so to speak, on a different scale, there's not really a ceiling, and I think that'll be something he can't wait to get his hand stuck into, really.
Yeah, I agree. Every team has their cycle. And it was, the point you've made, Tom, is that it looked like, Nathan Ake was going to leave even before the end of the season anyway. So that cycle of players were starting to come to an end. Our cycle's been 5 years. Ever since we first got relegated, our cycle as a club is 5 years relegation, 5 years relegation. What would you know? Our 5-year cycle is coming up this season, and this is where it's a genuine worry that we could potentially get relegated. But the takeover has given us a fresh emphasis and a fresh outlook on things, and hopefully we'll be able to stay up. But look, we've had really, really good conversation with regards to Eddie Howe and various things, misconceptions and opinions that I think we've squashed. And hopefully the people in the chat will be able to listen to this and see Eddie Howe in a little bit of a different light. However, Eddie Howe signs the deal whenever it is. Hopefully it's tonight, possibly tomorrow, over the weekend. What do you think, in your opinion, and maybe speaking from experience, does he come in and instantly do to this squad of Newcastle players that are sitting currently 19th in the league with only 4 points?
I think one of the first things he'll do is make them fitter. I think what I always felt with Eddie Howe teams is, regardless of the result, regardless of how the season was going, we always ran more than the other team. We were so fit, it was ridiculous. I always felt that. There was always stats about distance covered and all that, and he really made sure he had a fit team. I always felt like that was quite key to him. So I think he'd definitely look at the squad and see who he can rely on to run and who he can rely on to, put them hard grafts in for him. And I think he'll also just be saying to that group, like any of us would really, you can be part of something here. If you show me that you want to fight for that shirt and you can keep us up, then you could be part of something really special there. And the world's talking about us. So, he would give people an opportunity if they're loyal and if they show to him that they'll play for him and they'll play for the shirt, then he'll let them be a part of something. So yeah, he'll be looking for grafters. He'll be looking for energy and all their basic things, because he's not going to, a team near the bottom of the table, he's not going to come in and expect them all to play unbelievable football and score 5 and 6 every week. He's going to be wanting the basics to be done well, and he's going to be wanting people that he can trust. When you're at the bottom and you're in a bit of a scrap. So yeah, I think he'll be looking for, and I think the maybe the aging players that he doesn't see a future with, maybe he'll try and get them out the door quickly, and he'll look for more young hungry players potentially. I'm not sure what the kind of makeup is of the squad in terms of age and things like that. I feel like there's a few that kind of look like they're near the end. Yeah. So it'll be which ones that he feels he's still got a few years out of, and which ones he feels will be up for the scrap, to be honest. And anyone that maybe looks like they're just here for a paycheck and will probably know they're off, I don't think he'll be involved. But I think he'll want to play a certain way. He'll definitely try and get them kind of fullbacks bombing on. I can't see too much of this 5 at the back stuff. He never really liked doing that with us. Yeah. He'll try and get someone close to Callum Wilson and, making sure that someone does the hard grafts in and around Wilson so he can go and be on that last defender and do what he does best and score goals, to be honest. And he's the one that put Callum Wilson on the map, so to speak. So that's going to be a big boost for you. I'll tell you what will be interesting is what he does with Matt Ritchie, because he never played him left back for us.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting, because is it something that's just happened because of Matt's age and things like that, and he's now going to be a wing back / fullback? I'm not sure. I mean, he was a right midfielder for us, and he was special. So yeah, that'll be really interesting if he just quickly chucks him back over there or not. But yeah, I think he'll probably, I don't know, he'll probably look to get people like your Longstaffs and people like that. They'll just give him a little bit and then try and get someone with a bit of quality come January in and around them. But if he can think, well, someone, I'm just, Longstaff is the first one that comes to my head, but someone like that who'll put the graft in and then get someone with a bit more ability alongside him, kind of things like that. But it will be interesting, but I'm absolutely convinced that you'll be fine and you'll stay up.
The point that you made, I was also going to raise the Richie point, but you touched on it anyway, and you made the key point in that you look at the way in which he played with Bournemouth. You guys did a lot of running. particularly from fullback situations. He did a lot of running there, and Richie's not a runner right now. He's lost probably a couple of yards of pace. And it is interesting you mentioned he might just fling him back on the right. Actually, we've got a lot of competition now. If we're going to play a different system, he's got Ryan Fraser, Alan St. Maximin, he's got Miggy Almiron, he's got, other options that he can go to before Matt Ritchie. So it is going to be interesting. I was interested in your point, because I know you had like the likes of Dan Gosling and Billing in there that they like to get around the pitch. In particular, Dan Gosling like to arrive in the box late. I was talking to one of our other loaded lads, Chris, last night, and I was mentioned about what he could maybe get out of Joe Willock, because Joe Willock is a very similar type of player, probably a little bit more ability than the likes of Dan Gosling, but that running up and down, that box to box, but could also arrive in late in the box like Dan Gosling did for you guys, and got actually quite a few goals. So there's a lot that he could work with for sure with this squad of players, even currently, even before January. So I think we're all sort of excited about that. But just finally, that what did you have a definitive formation? And you talked about your style of play, but was there a definitive formation? We've seen the masterclass video of the Chelsea win where you guys dismantled them. You talked about playing a different type of system in that game, but was there a definitive system and formation that he tended to play most weeks?
I mean, I think in the Championship there definitely was, and in League One, all that, it was 4-4-2. It was, but I think when we went up to the Premier League, he would, if he had the two up top, someone would definitely drop deep, and you'd kind of say, well, they're not really up top alongside, say, Callum Wilson. But it was, like you said, with that kind of Chelsea thing, he was game to game. It was, because I suppose it's going to be interesting with you guys, but I suppose from our perspective, it would be odd to play, for example, Hull at home and then play the same way away at Man City.
Yeah.
So he would adapt, but the thing that always remained the same was he was going to try and win the game. But we would never sit back, whatever the kind of tactics were or the system were. We'd always try and attack. And like I say, maybe he tried to adapt that too much in that final season to try and make us better defensively. But whatever the system was, I think a key thing for Bournemouth was always wide. I think, like you mentioned there with Richie, the fullbacks would always fly on. He'd never be one of them. You see certain managers that they play kind of centre halves at fullback now and again. Never. He'd rather play a winger there. Fraser played right back a few times for us, for example, and Stanislas played right back. Yeah. Because he wanted his fullbacks to bomb on. He'd rather that, and then kind of have, say, a sitting midfielder that could drop deep. But he liked his fullbacks to give them kind of extra width, basically, and then them kind of wide players like a Matt Ritchie, who was left-footed, would play on the right because then he could come inside. Yeah. So it was them sort of things. But yeah, it would definitely adapt in the game. And it was interesting you mentioned Willett, because he was one I thought of as well. That's a Eddie Howe type player, a goal scoring midfielder, but would also do the hard graft as well. He wants to make sure they've got legs on him, and I think Willett could be that type of player. But yeah, and it'll be interesting with Ritchie, because I don't see him as a left back, but then equally, like you said, you've got some options out wide. The only thing I'm thinking is when he first goes into the club, he'll go, I can trust you, and that might be why he might start with, say, a Ritchie in there. He'll probably have to have a little conversation with Fraser before he plays him. I'm not sure. That will be interesting. But
was that was another thing. Was that obviously for you Bournemouth fans, and I think there's a few in the chat that are not particularly pleased with Ryan Fraser still from the Bournemouth perspective, and rightly so, because it added to your downfall effectively, because he was an influential player for you guys, certainly in the last 2 or 3 years at the club. But do you think? Because a lot of Newcastle fans seem to think that Eddie Howe won't come. He didn't get on with Ryan Fraser. Blah 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 blah. They had a big fallout. Do you think that's really going to be a problem when he walks through the door? Do you think he might even need a conversation? Was it that bad?
I think what seems to have happened. I mean, it's interesting as well. Like I said, when we spoke to Simon Francis, he actually said that Ryan Fraser and Eddie Howe was the most kind of dad-son relationships he's ever seen. And I think what it was more at the end was disappointment from Eddie, to be honest. We took him as a young lad from Aberdeen. He couldn't get in our team in League One. He couldn't get in the Championship team. He wasn't involved at all, really, when we got promoted. We sent him out on loan, and he developed him into this player that I never thought he was going to be good enough He was so lightweight, and then when it got down to it, when we really needed him, I think probably with his agent in his ear, he just was worried about getting injured and missing out on that big move. And I just think it was more disappointment. I think Eddie was really let down with someone that he really developed and gave a lot to. And then when Eddie needed him, he let him down a bit. So I think that would have hurt Eddie. So I think maybe a chat will be potentially needed, but I don't think it's going to be a big thing. I think Eddie will probably just say to him, you know, we're all right. I want you back to what you were like, and etc. etc. And I think at the end of the day, Ryan Fraser is, as much as I don't like to say, is a good player. Every Bournemouth fan would love Eddie to go in there and say, I'll never chuck him in the reserves. I don't think it's going to happen because he has got the best out of him. It's as simple as that. So if he knows he can get that Ryan Fraser back, he will try to. Of course he will. Of course he will. But yeah, from a Bournemouth fan's perspective, I don't think there's anyone I've ever seen that will get, hated as much as Ryan. And it's just one of them things. I think they're probably, like I say, age has probably been in the air, and COVID and stuff like that didn't help because it was a weird situation, because normally he would have just been out of contract and he'd have left.
Yeah.
And he had to kind of get asked to play. But it's a sour taste in your mouth as a football fan when you know that club kind of made you and then you haven't helped us when we needed you. It was difficult for us. Yeah. So I really want Newcastle to do well, but I'll never want Ryan Fraser to do well, I'm afraid.
So we will know come January whether they've had whether their conversation's gone well or not, because it'll either be flying in creating and scoring goals, or it'll be on the transfer list and then end up moving on somewhere in January. So it won't be too long for us to wait until we find out either way. But before we wrap it up, Rich, have you got anything else you want to mention?
No, I think we've covered everything we wanted. I just wanted to put a comment out, only because it's not. I know it hasn't really got anything relevant to do with what we were born with, but I just want to say thank you to Luke, because he's actually been our first ever super chat contributor. So thank you very much, Luke. Much appreciated. So we will answer your question, even though it was answered in chat. Unfortunately, we have to wait until January, but at the same time, we've also got a 25-man squad at the moment anyway. So there will have to be some outgoings before we can do any sort of dealings anyway. But thank you very much for the question, Luke. We much appreciate it. And I hope that's answered your question for you. So back over to you, Pete.
Yeah, no, spot on. And to say that the super chat is open. That is the benefits of being sort of in the 1,000 above subscription. So massive thanks to Luke. It is still open. Just really, really quickly, if I may just go through and just to say we're aiming to get to 2K subscriptions. So if you haven't, any Bournemouth fans in the chat that have liked the show so far, give us a subscription, give the show a like, promote it, and we've not been going long 6 months, but we've made sort of a rapid rise. We're really enjoying the ride at the moment, and it's been fantastic to mix with opposition fans, just like Tom tonight. If you haven't watched it already, we had the away days last night with Together, BHA, Brighton Hove Albion podcast, and also Chloe, the British tea hater. Fantastic show last night. Really, really enjoyed it. If you haven't watched it already, give that one a watch as well. And don't forget, we are back tonight in just about 19 minutes.
15 minutes, yeah.
About 19 minutes time, we're back for our flagship Loaded Mag. All the boys will be there chatting about Eddie Howe and the massive game that is Brighton tomorrow. But look, for now, we'll leave it there. Massive thanks to you, Tom. Thank you for taking the time to come onto the show tonight. Really, really appreciate it. I hope for a lot of Newcastle fans that are watching, we've had over 100 watching on the chat tonight, which is a fantastic numbers. I hope that's changed your minds in terms of how you see Eddie Howe potentially coming into the door in the next 24, 48 hours. A lot of misconceptions there that have been squashed. And, I'm really excited Really excited to see what Eddie Howe can do with our club and with our group of players. And hearing Tom speaking about certain players that we've got in our squad that he could really develop, the likes of Willock and one or two others, it has actually made me even more excited. I'm just kind of waiting patiently now. We both are, me and Rich, for that yellow ticker to come on Sky Sports News to say that it's official, and we can all just kind of take a deep breath and just relax. But until then, we'll sign off. See you all at 8. Fantastic to have you on, Tom. Hopefully we'll have you on again later on down the line to see hopefully how Eddie Howe has settled in the job at Newcastle.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks, Tom.
You guys take care. Have a good one.